Isometric platforming games are the bane of some people's existence, but there's something about them that's always clicked with me. Maybe it was the very early exposure I had playing countless hours of Snake Rattle and Roll or Bill and Ted's excellent video game adventure. No matter where that spark came from, you can imagine how intriguing it was to learn of a game that not only took tough jumps in platforming very seriously, but also introduced exploration and problem solving into the mix. Solstice, the quest for the Staff of Demnos, unfolds entirely inside a place called Castle Rock. A terrible wizard named Morbius has kidnapped the beloved Princess Eleanor and intends to kill her in order to rise to ultimate power. The only thing that can defeat him is the staff, but to keep it out of his hands, it was divided into 6 pieces and hidden away out of sight with magic long ago. Despite Morbius's best efforts, he and his men have been unable to locate it to destroy it. Fortunately for you, an absolutely jacked mage named Shadax in disguise, there's some insider information indicating that the pieces of the staff are actually inside of the walls of Morbius's own castle, the last place he'd ever think to hunt for them. And conveniently for Shadax, with his secret way into Castle Rock, it's the one day of the century that they'll become visible for a short time. It's up to you to spare no effort in finding the lost staff pieces and save the princess from certain death. I wanted to take a moment to say how much I love the manual for this game. Its presentation as a set of scrolls and eloquent writing voice are really unique in a world of shoddily translated manuals filled to the brim with lies from the NES era. All of the sweet ingredients for adventure are here, with ancient poetry and a beautifully narrated backstory to complement the brief visual intro at the beginning of the game. I think the only comparable example I've seen like this is Tombs and Treasure, where you're treated to an adventurer's diary before starting up the quest. I wish more manuals were a true companion to a game's world like these two are. It feels extra special when a game comes with a mixture of media that together creates a convincing sense of immersion. Anyway, when you finally take control of Shadax, you'll find yourself standing in the first of many rooms that make up Castle Rock. Other than knowing that the staff pieces need to be found to rescue Eleanor, there's absolutely no indication of where to start looking or how to track them down. The only thing you can do is choose a door and step through to the other side to see what awaits you. And this ambiguity is one of my favorite things about Solstice and other games like it. Adventures like The Legend of Zelda, Legacy of the Wizard, Blaster Master, or even Milon Seeker Castle just deposit you in a strange place with an objective to fulfill, with nothing other than your own imagination and skill as your sword and shield. Because of the nature of the game and its insistence on layering on more difficult challenges and spatial awareness the deeper you get, Solstice will undoubtedly push many players' limits to new heights. This is not the kind of endeavor that you'll finish the first time you sit down with it, and it requires a lot of experimentation before hammering out a sound plan of attack. Admittedly, this kind of gameplay can be really frustrating to people that enjoy a more straightforward approach, but if you liked any of the other games I just mentioned, you'll definitely enjoy figuring out Solstice's many trials. The rooms revolve around problems with many moving parts to piece together. Obstacles are almost always accompanied by precarious platforming that dials the risk factor up to 11, requiring some extreme precision to have any chance at success. Whether it's figuring out some timing to avoid patrolling monsters or determining where hidden platforms are to hop across a large chasm, there's seemingly no end to the questions you'll have to find answers to in order to keep moving along. What really pushes the difficulty high is that whatever does you in always does so in one hit. Even a gentle caress against a single pixel of Shadax's sprite will fell him. As a first-time player, this was incredibly nerve-wracking. There's so many things to eat tons of your proverbial quarters in the first couple of screens you have access to, and that's just the tip of the punishment iceberg. What kept my morale intact was going in with the mindset that every run, even a failed one, was a learning opportunity to figure out a couple more steps on the long list of motions I'd need to go through to win. Knowledge was always a gift, even if it came in the form of a little mage dissolving into nothingness as he screamed into the sky. One really interesting aspect here is that you actually have no mechanism to physically attack enemies. Almost all actions are passive, where you avoid monsters rather than plowing through them. This is a nice touch since, in the story, you're in disguise trying to blend in. A beefy wizard whacking away at Castle Rock's minions would be pretty out of character for a friend of Morbius. In the absence of weapons, there are potions to wield instead that add a lot to the critical thinking this game demands. You start out with a few casts of several magics that do all sorts of useful stuff, like stopping time or destroying anything that moves in a room. While these are finite, they can be refilled if you can uncover where more potion is stashed. I found myself relying on them a lot in early game when I was figuring out some trickier places, or scared of the timing of moving spike balls, for example. After a while though, I'd walked through these rooms so many times that the locations of invisible platforms were baked into my brain, and I didn't need to use the reveal potion on those spots anymore. I could save them up for new rooms that I'd encounter later, and that's the beauty of Solstice. It gives you everything you need to get comfortable with your surroundings, and then some. You'll always have what you need to succeed, and if you don't, you can always apply what you learned the next time, or go off exploring to find more consumables. I also really appreciated that the hurdles you face gradually scale up in difficulty. The stage design doesn't immediately shove you into extreme platforming maneuvers that require multiple timed mid-air block jumps straight out of the gate. Instead, they build up your confidence, teach you everything you need to know, and then heap on more intensity. The pacing felt perfect, building up the challenge to keep things feeling forever risk-filled but manageable. Any feelings of dread that I experienced the first time I walked through a door were almost always quickly replaced with a sense of wonder and excitement. Except this one stupid one that I never learned to anticipate the entire time I played. It always killed me, and it can get bent. Another really cool thing is that you're never pressured into single-solution problem-solving here. Any room can be approached from several different angles with the expectation of some outside-the-box thinking. You can choose to employ some of your tools or none at all. It's all up to you. It was so freeing to be able to develop my own strategies, rather than needing to bend to the will of a developer whose intended solution might not have been my first pick, or my second for that matter. That freedom also extends to the order in which you complete the different areas of Castle Rock. As long as you end up with the 6 staff pieces by the end, you can proceed in almost any order you like. There was clearly a lot of care put into this incredible design choice, and it also provides a system for player relief. If you find yourself stuck on one particularly difficult room, you don't have to burn through all your lives, continues, and patience grinding away until you get it. Because of that openness of the game world, at any time you can walk away and go do something else and still be productive. This is a pretty rare occurrence on the NES among many other titles that force you down a single path with checkpoints that need to be crossed before you can move on to the next thing. It felt great to back away from something that was causing me grief, but still being able to contribute to the big picture all the same. I think Solstice has some of the best character control that I've ever encountered in an isometric platformer. Shadax moves quickly, but is also able to stop on a dime. The jumping is also very measured and predictable, and it can be extended even higher and farther once you find the boots early on. And hey, for any astute players or anyone staring blankly at the attract screen taking in the hot jams, the game drops you a couple of hints, including how to get these. That's actually how I learned how that room worked, and it was nice to go into the adventure with those as a goal in mind. I really liked how many of these little excerpts give you ideas to try rather than being the typical shameful display of other demos. I've seen so many where the built-in NES AI immediately gets wrecked by the first hazard. That never instills hope in me as a new player, making Solstice's efforts a standout to me. Moving on, even with the solid controls in place, being precise was still tricky. This is partly due to the perspective here, since the surroundings themselves can create illusions of how far away things are from your position in the room. Sometimes you'll be standing on a platform suspended in midair, staring at another platform that you want to jump to. You won't have any idea if it's in front of you, above you, or beside you until you take the risk and go for it, which could feel incredibly unfair if you die trying. Even worse is that there are no shadows on anything in this game, including your character, so you have no sense of depth while trying to plan your next move. This makes those precise controls I mentioned a blessing and a curse, because every mistake is on you for either under or overcompensating. Getting around will feel impossible at first, but like anything else, after spending a little time with it, you'll be able to make educated guesses rather than taking shots in the dark. Solstice has this funny habit of showing you something you need or want, like a staff piece, a free life, or a potion refill, but then blocking your access to it. Even when you know where you want to go, a large part of the battle is figuring out how to get there. The complex that is Castle Rock is enormous and confusing, whether you're traveling through the Gardens of Pain, the Slaughter Yards, the Mines of Insanity, or any of the other heavy metal-themed locales throughout. Many rooms force you to move in a single direction with no way back, so no path to a goal is ever straightforward, even if it seems that way. There's a map in the menu that can be accessed at any time, and it's actually quite nice. It keeps track of every room you've been into, along with showing you all possible exits and whether or not you can travel to floors above or below it. Many of my most brilliant schemes were launched from staring at the map screen. The only downside is that you're pretty zoomed in and can't freely navigate to other areas. But nonetheless, it was considerably better than having nothing. As much as I enjoy mapping these old games, I was happy to sidestep tackling a multi-floor maze with different sized rooms that wouldn't snugly fit into the confines of graph paper. There are only a handful of small things that annoyed me about Solstice, and the first is the continue system. You pick up credits along the way and your progress in your current run is saved. If you lose all of your lives on a continue, no matter how much you've achieved since then, you go back to that last token you got and lose all of your progress after that point. It's almost worthwhile to avoid grabbing them until you find a staff piece or make some good headway, but no matter how careful you are, bleeding too many continues can put you back so far that it's almost better to reset and start over again. On the bright side, the game is extremely generous with how many free lives it provides if you can find them, but like everything else, you can only pick them up once per playthrough. I found this continue method to be very punishing. A more typical framework might have made things a little too easy, but as it was good motivation to get good. The other issue I have is really minor, but I hate that they have potion use mapped to the start button on the controller. I lost count of how many times I used one by accident. I'd be in the middle of a failed jump, wildly panicking, usually seconds away from death, and end up mashing the start button in an effort to pause, only to waste some potion for my next life. Even worse still is that the sound effect that plays when you use magic is extremely loud, and that would usually spook me, making these moments feel even more stressful. The potion noise was really the only thing that felt unbalanced compared to everything else in the sound department. I alluded to it earlier, but the music in Solstice is nothing short of extraordinary. There isn't much music variety, and in fact, there's really only that one good song that plays the entire time, but it's lengthy and varied enough that I never found it to be too repetitive. It also suits the atmosphere really well. It's up there with the dungeon music in games like Star Tropics. It's good that it's so catchy and unobtrusive because you'll be stuck listening to it a lot. When I finally found myself standing at the end of Solstice, the quest for the Staff of Demnos, I was overwhelmed with feelings of both accomplishment and delight. There are very few experiences on the NES that have issued a challenge that is so multifaceted but fun all the same. While the idea of getting through this entire game on a small set of continues might be extremely off-putting to some, I humbly request that you spend some time with it to see all that it has on offer. Of the short list of hard games I've finished on the system, this was certainly one of the most compelling. Thinking about the solutions didn't just happen while I was sitting behind the controller. It invaded my thoughts while I was falling asleep at night or daydreaming about it at work. Castle Rock was such an enjoyable riddle to solve. If you are at all a fan of puzzle platformers, isometric or otherwise, this is a must-play for you.